Welcome back to Busta Stories, the only channel where every story you hear is real, researched, and confirmed. I'm your host, and tonight we're doing something different. We're not just telling terrifying stories, we're telling them beneath the steady rhythm of falling rain. Because rain has a way of sharpening your senses, of slowing down time, of making you sit still and listen. These aren't made-up tales. These are true accounts from police reports, survivor testimonies, and credible sources told exactly as they happened. And while the rain falls in the background, you'll hear every whisper, every creak, every breath. Because some stories don't need jump scares. They just need silence and a storm. So plug in your headphones, dim the lights, let the rain pull you in. And remember, just because you're safe and dry doesn't mean they were. I was barely 20, a young woman thrust into the role of a venture scout leader for my local Boy Scout troop. My brother had been part of the troop for years, and I'd grown close to the boys, earning my place as a chaperone for this November 2018 camping trip along Arkansas's Buffalo National River. The river stretched 135 miles through the Ozark Mountains, its waters carving paths beneath towering bluffs that loomed like silent sentinels. It was breathtaking, lush, wild, untouched. But that night, its beauty felt like a mask hiding something sinister. Sam, my longtime friend and fellow leader, was older, seasoned, and unshakably calm. He'd been guiding these trips for years, sleeping under the stars, with nothing but a hammock and a carefree grin. I envied his ease. As we set up camp that afternoon, the scouts pitched their tents 25 yards upstream, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. The campfire crackled between us, its warmth a fragile barrier against the chill creeping in. I confessed to Sam that I was nervous about sleeping alone in my tent for the first time. "Just relax," he said, brushing off my unease with a shrug. "It's peaceful out here." I rolled my eyes, knowing he'd never understand. To him, the wilderness was home. To me, it was a vast, unknowable void. He must have sensed my fear, though, because he set up his sleeping pad right outside my tent, flipping his canoe over himself like a makeshift coffin. I couldn't help but marvel at his fearlessness, his ability to lie exposed under the stars. That evening, we gathered around the campfire, the boys' voices mingling with the river's murmur and the rustling forest. The world felt alive, vibrant, almost comforting. But as night fell and the temperature plummeted below freezing, that comfort dissolved. I crawled into my tent, the nylon walls flimsy against the vastness outside. My flashlight cast jagged shadows, and every snap of a twig made my heart lurch. I tried to read, to drown out the silence, but the boys' chatter faded, leaving only the river's relentless whisper. "You're alone," it seemed to say. "No one's coming to save you." I lay there, shivering, my breath visible in the cold. The forest's sounds, or lack thereof, pressed against me heavy and oppressive. I told myself it was just nerves, just the newness of leading the troop. But deep down, a primal instinct stirred, warning me that something was watching, waiting. The night stretched on endless, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the wilderness wasn't as empty as it seemed. The cold bit into my bones, a relentless ache that kept sleep at bay. I huddled in my sleeping bag, rubbing my legs to chase away the numbness, but the chill was merciless. Then, nature called an inconvenient urge I tried to ignore. For 10 agonizing minutes, I fought it, willing my body to forget. But it was no use. "Get up," my mind urged. "You can't stay like this." I unzipped my tent, the sound deafening in the quiet, and tapped Sam's canoe to let him know I was stepping out. His soft snores answered oblivious to my dread. I climbed the riverbank, my boots crunching on frosted grass, and ventured 10 feet into the woods for privacy. The forest was a tomb. No crickets chirped, no squirrels rustled. The silence was unnatural, a void that swallowed sound and left only my pounding heartbeat. I crouched vulnerable in the freezing dark, my breath clouding the air. "Hurry," I told myself, but my body trembled, not just from the cold, but from a growing sense of wrongness. The woods weren't just quiet, they were holding their breath. My mind flashed to stories my grandmother told of spirits that haunted the Ozarks, of things that moved unseen in the night. I shook my head, dismissing it as childish fear, but the primal part of my brain screamed, "Run! Now!" I scrambled back to the riverbank, sliding down the embankment in a clumsy rush. The full moon's glow bathed the camp, the dying campfire embers flickering like distant stars. Safety felt closer here among the tents and the river's gentle burble. I caught my breath, my heart still racing, and decided to try a trick I'd read about, warming stones from the fire to heat my sleeping bag. I dragged a few smooth river rocks into my tent, their faint warmth a small comfort against the cold. But it wasn't enough. The ache in my legs persisted, and exhaustion brought tears to my eyes. I was alone, freezing, and trapped in a night that refused to end. Then I heard its footsteps, not the soft tread of a scout, but heavy, deliberate crunching on the river stones downstream. My breath caught. It's just one of the boys, I thought, but the steps were too steady, too purposeful. They moved closer, then splashed into the shallow water. Panic surged. Was someone sneaking out for a midnight swim? I unzipped my tent, my hands shaking, and peered into the moonlight. There in the shadows stood a massive creature, too large for a deer, too upright for any animal I knew. Its head turned, and though its face was cloaked in darkness, I felt its gaze lock onto me. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from a terror so deep it felt like my bones were screaming. I ducked back inside my heart, pounding, and curled into my sleeping bag, praying the night would end. The creature's gaze lingered in my mind, its shadowy form etched into my memory like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I lay frozen, the tent's thin walls, no barrier against the fear clawing at my chest. The silence returned louder than before, a suffocating absence that made every breath feel stolen. I tried to focus on the river's murmur, but it was drowned out by the echo of my own heartbeat. "You're safe," I whispered to myself, but the words felt hollow. The woods were alive with something I couldn't name, something that watched and waited. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time blurred in the grip of fear. Then a new sound broke the silence, a soft tap on my tent, followed by a voice low and urgent. "Come on out," it said. "It's time to go." Relief flooded me. Dawn must have come. The nightmare was over. I pressed my face into my hands, exhaled a shaky breath, and fumbled for my boots. "You made it," I told myself, the warmth of hope thawing my fear. I unzipped the tent and stepped out, expecting the soft gray of morning. But the world was still cloaked in night, the moon's cold light mocking my relief. The camp was empty. No scouts, no Sam, no one. My stomach dropped. The voice had been so clear, so real. I scanned the riverbank, the campfire's embers barely glowing, the tents still and silent. The time between the voice and my stepping out was mere seconds too short for anyone to vanish. "Don't turn around." A primal instinct warned sharp and undeniable. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end, as if the air itself was charged with menace. I backed into my tent, my hands trembling as I zipped it shut, sealing myself in a cocoon of false safety. I lay down, pulling the sleeping bag over my face, and prayed. Not to God, not to anyone, just a desperate plea to survive until morning. The night stretched on each second, a battle against the urge to scream. I thought of Sam, sleeping soundly under his canoe, oblivious to the terror consuming me. I thought of the boys safe in their tents, unaware of whatever lurked beyond the firelight. And I thought of the voice, calm, commanding wrong. It wasn't Sam's voice, nor any of the scouts. It was something else, something that knew my name, my fear, my solitude. Stay still, I told myself, anchoring my mind to the rhythm of my breath. But the silence pressed harder, and I could almost feel it watching, waiting for me to move to answer its call. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The night held me captive, and I was its prisoner. Morning came like a mercy. The sun's warmth seeping through the tent, banishing the night's terror. I stumbled out, my eyes heavy, my body aching from cold and fear. Sam was already up, chatting with another scout, his easy smile a stark contrast to my haggard appearance. "Geez, you look like you didn't sleep at all," he said, his brow furrowing. I forced a weak laugh, my voice hoarse. "Did you come to my tent last night?" I asked, clinging to the hope that it was him, that the voice was just a prank. He shook his head, his expression serious. "No, Diana, I wouldn't scare you like that, especially knowing how nervous you were." My heart sank. If it wasn't Sam, who was it? I pressed him desperate. "Please don't mess with me. If you did, just say it." But he was adamant, his eyes steady. "I'm not joking. I was out cold." He paused, then gestured toward the woods. "But I heard you make a few trips up there last night. Next time, just use a bottle." His words hit like a punch. I'd only left the tent once to pee up the embankment and back. One trip, not multiple. My knees buckled, and I sank to the ground, the river's mud cold against my skin. If it wasn't me, what did Sam hear? The scouts called us to breakfast, their voices pulling me back to reality. But the forest's edge loomed dark and unyielding, as if it held secrets it refused to share. I told this story years later, and people dismissed it as a dream, a trick of exhaustion. But I know what I felt, the creature's gaze, the voice's command, the footsteps Sam heard that weren't mine. The Buffalo River is beautiful, its bluffs and waters a siren's call to adventurers. But something else lives there, something ancient, hungry, and unseen. It watches from the shadows. Its presence, a whisper in the silence, a weight in the air. Go there, it seems to say, but don't expect to leave unchanged. I never returned. The memory of that night clings to me, a cold hand on my heart, reminding me that some places aren't meant for us. For over a year, I've been the one to lock up the small town diner where I work a job that pays an extra hour for simple tasks like mopping the floors or rolling silverware. It's calming, almost meditative, after the chaos of a busy night in the kitchen. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversations, the sizzle of the grill, all fade away, leaving me alone in a space that feels too big for one person. The fluorescent lights buzz faintly, casting long shadows across the empty tables, and the air smells of bleach and lingering grease. I've grown used to the solitude, but tonight something felt wrong. The stillness wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive, like a predator lying in wait. I started my routine, as always, locking the back and front doors, the keys cold against my fingers. The restaurant's layout is inconvenient. Main light switches on the opposite side from the side door where the alarm keypad sits. To arm the system, every door must be secured. No movement detected by the infrared sensors. I've done this 100 times, but tonight, my footsteps echoed louder on the tiled floor. Each step a reminder of how alone I was. I didn't bother checking the bathrooms. The place empties out long before closing, and I'd been here for 2 hours, already mopping, cleaning, and rolling silverware for the morning crew. The ice machine hummed in the corner, its occasional rumble, the only sound breaking the quiet. I told myself it was just another night, but my skin prickled as if someone or something was watching me from the shadows. The dining room stretched out before me, a maze of tables and chairs under dim emergency lights. I flicked off the main lights, plunging the room into near darkness, save for the faint glow from the exit signs. I've never liked walking through the dark restaurant to the keypad, but using my phone's flashlight is worse. It casts jagged shadows that twist and dance, making every corner feel alive. Tonight, I chose the darkness, my eyes adjusting to the faint outlines of booths and counters. My heart beat faster than usual, a steady thump against my ribs, and I quickened my pace, eager to punch in the code and leave. The keypad glowed green, a small beacon in the gloom, promising safety. But as I reached it, a chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from a gut-deep certainty. I wasn't alone. The restaurant wasn't just quiet. It was too quiet. No hum from the vents, no distant traffic, just a suffocating silence that pressed against my ears. I stood frozen fingers, hovering over the keypad, straining to hear anything. A creak, a shuffle. Anything to explain the unease crawling up my neck. Nothing. Just my own breathing, shallow and quick. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the feeling. You're tired, I told myself. It's just the late hour playing tricks. But deep down, I knew better. Something was here in the dark, waiting. I could feel its presence, heavy and unyielding, like a shadow that didn't need light to exist. My fingers trembled, as I prepared to type the code. But I couldn't shake the thought. What if it's watching me? Right now. I punched in the code, the keypad's soft beeps cutting through the silence like a knife. But instead of the usual confirmation, the screen flashed red, error, infrared detected, dining room. My stomach dropped, a cold knot forming in my gut. I'd been alone for 2 hours, hadn't I? I'd walked through that dining room just moments ago. Its tables empty, its chairs still. No one could be there. Yet the alarm insisted otherwise, its warning pulsing in the dark. I stared at the screen, willing it to change, to tell me it was a glitch. But the words stayed stark and unyielding. Each letter a quiet accusation. Something moved. My mind raced, grasping for logical explanations. Maybe a rat tripped the sensor, or a stray napkin fluttered to the floor. But the infrared doesn't lie. It detects heat, motion, life. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the dining room's shadows. The tables stood like silent sentinels, their surfaces gleaming faintly under the exit sign's glow. Nothing moved, but the air felt charged, as if the room itself was holding its breath. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the silence, and I gripped the edge of the counter, anchoring myself against the rising panic. Stay calm, I told myself. Check the room. Prove it's nothing. I took a step forward, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the tile, and froze. A sound, soft but unmistakable, came from the dining room. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving toward me from the far side of the room. Each step was a slow, measured thud, like someone testing the floor, savoring the approach. My breath caught my body screaming to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. The darkness seemed to thicken the shadows, pooling in the corners, stretching toward me. I strained to see my eyes darting from table to table, but the dim light revealed nothing. Yet the footsteps grew louder, closer, each one a hammer blow to my nerves. I wanted to call out, to demand who was there, but my throat tightened. Words trapped behind fear. You're imagining it, I thought, but the sound was too real, too precise. It wasn't a rat or a loose chair. It was human, or something pretending to be. My mind flashed to stories. I'd heard tales of late-night workers stalked by things that shouldn't exist. I pushed them away, focusing on the keypad. Try again, I urged myself. I typed the code once more, my fingers shaking, but the error flashed again. Infrared detected. Dining room. The footsteps stopped, sudden and jarring, leaving only silence. But it wasn't a relief. It was worse. Whatever was out there was standing still, waiting just beyond my sight. I backed toward the door, my hand fumbling for the handle. The cold metal grounded me a reminder of escape, but the thought of turning my back on the dining room filled me with dread. What if it rushed me the moment I looked away? My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst, every nerve screaming to flee. I glanced at the dining room one last time, half expecting to see glowing eyes or a twisted figure emerging from the shadows. Nothing. Just darkness. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming, a primal instinct that refused to be ignored. I gripped the handle tighter, ready to bolt, knowing that whatever was in there was closer than I could bear to imagine. The door was my only way out, but opening it meant turning my back on the dining room, on whatever was lurking in the dark. My hand trembled on the handle, slick with sweat, as I weighed my options: stay and face it, or run and pray it didn't follow. The silence was unbearable now, thick with anticipation, like the moment before a storm breaks. I could still feel it, those unseen eyes boring into me, tracking every shallow breath, every twitch of my fingers. I didn't want to look back, but I had to. Just one glance, I told myself to be sure. I turned my head slowly, my neck stiff with fear, and scanned the dining room. Empty. But the shadows seemed deeper, the air colder, as if the room itself was complicit in hiding whatever was there. I couldn't wait any longer. I yanked the door open, the cold night air rushing in, and stumbled into the parking lot. My car was parked under a flickering street light, its weak glow barely pushing back the darkness. I sprinted toward it, my footsteps pounding the asphalt, my breath ragged in my throat. I didn't dare look behind me, but I could feel it, something watching, something following its presence, like a weight on my back. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped them and threw myself into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the lot, the tires screeching as I sped down the street. I didn't stop until I was blocks away, my heart still racing, my hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. I pulled over and called 911, my voice shaking as I explained what happened. Then I called my boss, dreading his reaction, but needing to tell someone. When we returned to the restaurant, the door was wide open, just as I'd left it. Nothing was stolen, nothing broken, but the air felt wrong, tainted. The police searched the place, their flashlights cutting through the dark, but found no one. Then, my boss showed me the footage from the exterior camera. There I was, running out, my face pale with terror. And then, seconds later, a shadow, tall, elongated, impossibly still, appeared by the door, just out of frame, watching me flee. I couldn't sleep that night, or the nights after. The image of that shadow burned into my mind, its formless presence more terrifying than any face could be. Was it a person waiting in the dark for hours just to scare me? Or something else, something that didn't need to steal or break things to leave its mark? I've gone over it 1,000 times, trying to make sense of it. The restaurant was locked. The cameras showed no one entering. After close yet, something tripped the alarm. Something walked those floors. I still work there, but I never lock up alone anymore. Every time I'm in that dining room, I feel it, the weight of unseen eyes, the echo of footsteps that shouldn't be. And I know deep down that whatever was there that night hasn't left. The air in my room hung heavy, like a damp shroud, clinging to my skin, as if the darkness itself had grown thick with malice. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, where shadows twisted in the faint glow of my television's sleep mode. The little bubbles danced across the screen, their soft blue light, the only anchor in a room that felt too vast, too empty, yet suffocatingly alive. My tiny dog curled under the blanket. Beside me let out a faint snore, oblivious to the unease that gnawed at my bones. It was past midnight, the hour when the world feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. I'd always been a light sleeper, but tonight was different. The room wasn't just quiet. It was wrong. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, a silence that screams louder than any sound. My Jack Skellington tapestry loomed on the wall, its skeletal grin mocking me in the dim light. I tried to focus on it to ground myself, but my heart thudded in my chest, each beat a reminder that I was alone. Or was I? The thought slithered into my mind, unbidden, cold and sharp, like a blade slipping between my ribs. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, its gaze heavy, like a predator sizing up prey. I told myself it was just my imagination. I'd been reading too many horror stories, scrolling through forums about shadow people and sleep demons late into the night. But the air grew thicker, carrying a faint, putrid scent, sulfur mixed with something rancid, like meat left to rot in a forgotten corner. My stomach churned, and I pulled the blanket tighter, as if it could shield me from whatever was out there. My dog stirred her warmth, a small comfort, but even she seemed restless, now her breathing uneven. I wanted to move, to turn on the light, to break this oppressive stillness, but my body refused. It was as if an invisible weight pinned me to the mattress, my limbs heavy, my chest tight. I tried to breathe slowly, counting each inhale, each exhale, but the air felt like it was congealing in my lungs. Then I heard it, a faint shuffle, like bare feet dragging across the carpet, coming from the direction of my closet. My heart stopped. The closet door was ajar, a black slit in the wall that seemed to pulse with intent. I strained my eyes, searching the darkness, but saw nothing. Yet the sound came again, deliberate, slow, as if whatever was there wanted me to know. It was moving closer. My mind screamed to get up to run, but my body was a prisoner, locked in place by an unseen force. I remembered a story my friend had told me about a night she woke up unable to move, feeling eyes on her from the corner of her room. She'd laughed it off as sleep paralysis, a trick of the brain. But now, lying here, I wasn't so sure. The shuffle stopped, and for a moment, I dared to hope it was over. Then, from the foot of my bed, a shadow moved, just a flicker, but enough to send ice through my veins. It wasn't human. It was too tall, too thin, its edges blurring into the darkness like smoke. And it was watching me. I could feel its gaze, not just on my skin, but inside me, peeling back my thoughts, feeding on my fear. The shadow at the foot of my bed grew solid, its form sharpening into something that made my blood scream. It was tall, impossibly, so its head brushing the ceiling, cloaked in a darkness that seemed to swallow the faint light from the television. A top hat sat crooked on its head, tilting at an angle that defied gravity, as if it were part of the creature rather than an accessory. Its face, or what should have been a face, was a void, featureless, except for a grin that stretched too wide, too wrong, like a wound carved into the night itself. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst each beat, a desperate plea to wake up, to escape. But I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. The thing leaned closer, its grin widening, and I felt a wave of cold wash over me, like stepping into a freezer. The air grew denser, the sulfur stench now overwhelming, choking me with every shallow breath. My dog whimpered, burrowing deeper under the blanket, as if she sensed it too. The creature's presence was a weight not just on my body, but on my soul, pressing down until I felt like I was sinking into the mattress, into the floor, into some endless abyss. Its grin seemed to pulse a silent promise of torment, and I knew it was feeding on my terror, savoring every second of my helplessness. It moved closer, its form gliding without sound, and I saw its hands, or what passed for hands, long skeletal fingers that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. They hovered over the edge of my bed, inches from my feet, and I wanted to scream, to kick, to do anything. But my body was a traitor, frozen in this waking nightmare. Then it spoke, not with a voice, but with a low, guttural rasp that seemed to come from inside my skull. I watch you sleep at night. So lovely you are. The words burrowed into my mind, each syllable a spike of dread anchoring me to this moment of pure horror. I tried to close my eyes to shut it out, but they wouldn't obey. The creature tilted its head as if amused and leaned closer still, its faceless grin now inches from my face. I could feel its breath, hot, rancid, like decay itself, brushing against my cheek. My tears came unbidden, sliding down my temples, pooling in my ears, but I couldn't wipe them away. The thing's grin stretched wider, and I swore I saw teeth, jagged and uneven, glinting in the dim light. It was enjoying this, thriving on my panic. And I realized, with sickening clarity, that it wasn't just here to watch. It wanted something more. I thought of my childhood of nights spent hiding under the covers, convinced a monster was lurking in the dark. Back then, my mother would check under the bed in the closet and tell me it was all in my head. But this wasn't my imagination. This was real as the bed beneath me, as real as the tears soaking my pillow. The creature's fingers twitched, reaching closer, and I felt a scream building in my chest, trapped clawing at my throat. "You can't escape me," its voice whispered again, and I knew it was right. The scream finally tore free, shattering the silence, but it wasn't enough to break the creature's hold. My voice echoed in the room, raw and desperate. But the thing in the top hat didn't flinch. It hovered over me, its grin a gaping maw, its eyeless face somehow seeing every flicker of fear in my soul. My dog bolted from the bed, her nails scrabbling against the floor as she fled to the corner of the room, leaving me alone with this nightmare. The creature's skeletal fingers grazed my cheek, cold as death, and I felt my mind fraying, unraveling under the weight of its presence. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished, dissolving into the shadows like smoke in the wind. I sat up, gasping my body, finally my own again. The room was still the television's, bubbles drifting lazily across the screen. But the air felt different now, lighter, but tainted, like the aftermath of a storm. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, needing light, needing proof that I was awake. The screen glowed to life, and I froze. there in my camera roll was a photo I didn't remember taking. It was me, lying in bed, eyes wide with terror, tears streaming down my face, my mouth open in a silent scream. But my eyes, they weren't mine. They were glassy, lifeless, like a doll's, staring into nothing. I dropped the phone, my breath hitching, as I scrambled to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. The mirror showed my reflection, but I barely recognized the face staring back, pale, hollow, haunted. I splashed water on my cheeks, trying to wash away the memory of that grin, that voice, but it clung to me a stain on my mind. I stayed in the bathroom until dawn, the light creeping through the window like a lifeline. When I finally returned to my room, the phone was still on the floor, the photo still there, undeniable. I told myself it was a dream, a trick of my mind, but the photo was real. I showed it to a friend who laughed nervously and said it was probably a glitch, a selfie taken by accident. But she didn't see what I saw in those eyes. Not mine, not human. I deleted the photo, but it didn't matter. Every night since I've felt it, the weight of that gaze, the faint whiff of sulfur in the air, I sleep with the lights on. Now my dog pressed close, but it's not enough. I know it's still out there, waiting, watching. Sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, I hear it again, that shuffle, that rasp, whispering my name. I don't look at my phone anymore, too afraid of what I might find. But I feel it, always just beyond the edge of my vision, grinning in the dark. It watches me sleep, and it will never stop. The salt-soaked wind clawed at my face, whispering warnings I couldn't yet hear. Each step on the endless beach felt like sinking into a dream where escape was a lie. The summer of 2023 had stretched us thin, my two friends and I, all 17, trudging through the final week of our hike from Graz, Austria to Venice, Italy. 20 days of relentless walking had carved blisters into our feet, the kind that throbbed with every heartbeat, as if our bodies begged us to stop. The sun had long vanished, leaving a moonless sky that pressed down like a suffocating blanket. We were lost not in direction, but in spirit. Our map, a cruel tease, as it pointed to a beach still miles away, promising rest we hadn't felt in days. The air was thick with the scent of seaweed and exhaustion. Our backpacks heavy with the weight of survival tents. Water, dreams of a warm bed we hadn't seen in weeks. My friend Luca, always the optimist, hummed a tune to keep our spirits up, but it faltered against the oppressive silence of the night. Marco, quieter, kept checking his watch, as if time could pull us out of this limbo. I felt it first, a prickle at the base of my skull, like eyes boring into me from the dark. "Turn around," my mind whispered, but I shook it off, blaming fatigue. The gravel crunched under our boots, each step a reminder of how far we were from safety. We'd passed through a city earlier, its lights a distant memory, now replaced by the desolate stretch of this beachside path. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of my steps lull me. But the sensation grew stronger, a presence unseen but undeniable trailing us. "You're not alone." The thought hit me like a cold wave, and I stumbled, my boot catching on a stone. Luca grabbed my arm, his face pale under the faint starlight. "You okay?" he asked, but his voice trembled, as if he felt it too. I nodded, swallowing the fear that clung to my throat like damp sand. We pressed on the map, promising a campsite just beyond the next bend, but the path seemed to stretch forever, mocking us. The silence was no longer just absence. It was alive, watching, waiting. A story my grandfather once told me crept into my mind, a tale of travelers lost in the Alps, followed by shadows that weren't human. I pushed it away, but the memory anchored itself, heavy as the pack on my shoulders. "Keep walking," I told myself. "Don't look back." But the air grew colder, the wind sharper, carrying a faint hum that wasn't the sea. It was rhythmic, like footsteps too deliberate to be the wind. My heart pounded each beat, a drum in my chest, urging me to run, to scream, to do anything but stay on this cursed path. We were so close to the campsite, yet it felt like we were walking into a trap set by the night itself. His silhouette stood like a wound in the darkness, tearing through the safety we thought we had. We reached the intersection, where the gravel path split, one trail leading into the woods, the other toward the promised campsite. Luca, lost in his exhaustion, walked past the turn, his head down, oblivious. I called out my voice, sharper than intended, slicing through the night. "Luca, this way?" He froze, turning back his eyes wide with something beyond fatigue, fear raw and unfiltered. I glanced behind us, and there he was, the man emerging from the path. We needed to take his figure, tall and angular, against the black sky. He moved with purpose, passing us without a word, his face hidden in shadow. For a moment, I thought he was just another wanderer, a late-night traveler like us. But then he stopped dead in the middle of the road and turned. His gaze locked onto us, unblinking, unmoving, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Run," my instincts screamed, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like blood. Marco whispered, "What's he doing?" But I couldn't answer, my throat tight with dread. The man stood there, a statue carved from the night, his presence a violation of the world we knew. We turned onto the gravel path, our steps quickening, but the sound of his footsteps followed deliberate, unhurried. "He's coming back!" The realization hit me like a punch, my breath catching. As I understood, he'd turned around, abandoning whatever path he'd been on to follow us. My mind raced, replaying every warning I'd ever heard about strangers in the dark. A friend's story surfaced about a hiker who vanished on a trail like this, found days later, with no explanation. Focus. I told myself, stay calm. But the crunch of gravel behind us grew louder. Closer, each step a hammer against my nerves. We whispered frantically, our voices low but urgent. "What do we do?" Luca asked, his eyes darting to the side. The path was narrow, flanked by dense woods on one side and a field of tall crops on the other. The man's step never faltered a steady rhythm that promised he wouldn't stop. "Jump into the field," a voice in my head commanded, and I obeyed, grabbing Luca and Marco, pulling them into the crops. The stalks scratched at our skin, the ground uneven beneath our feet, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. We stumbled over a ditch, the cold mud seeping into our shoes, but we kept moving, driven by the primal need to escape. Behind us, the man stopped. I risked a glance back, seeing his silhouette pivot, retreating to the road. But the relief was fleeting. His presence lingered in my mind, a shadow that refused to fade. We pushed through the field, the crops closing around us, like a cage, their sharp edges tearing at our clothes. The night was no longer just dark. It was a living thing, conspiring to keep us trapped. My grandfather's story echoed again, the shadows that followed travelers, never letting them go. "You're safe now," I tried to tell myself, but the lie tasted bitter, like the salt in the air. The city lights flickered like false promises, offering safety we couldn't trust. We burst out of the field, our lungs burning, our legs trembling from the weight of our packs and the terror that clung to us. The city streets lay ahead, empty, except for the occasional tourist, their laughter a cruel contrast to our panic. We kept to the shadows, moving quickly, our eyes scanning every corner for the man. The gravel path was behind us, but his presence felt like a stain on our souls, impossible to shake. My heart still raced each beat, a reminder of how close we'd come to something unspeakable. We passed a gas station, its neon glow harsh against the night. I glanced back, half expecting to see him standing there, watching, but the street was empty. He's gone, I told myself, but the words felt hollow. We walked another 5 kilometers, our bodies screaming for rest before we found a spot to set up our tents. The campsite was quiet, the kind of quiet that should have been comforting, but instead felt like a held breath, waiting to break. As we pitched our tents, the memory of his stare burned in my mind, those unseen eyes that had followed us into the dark. That night, I lay awake, the fabric of the tent too thin to feel safe. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, was him waiting just beyond the firelight. Luca and Marco slept their breathing steady, but I couldn't close my eyes. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and fear, and I kept replaying the moment he turned to follow us. What did he want? The question gnawed at me, each possible answer more terrifying than the last. A drunk playing a cruel joke. A predator with darker intentions. Or something else. Something that didn't belong to this world. My grandfather's story came back unbidden about the shadows that hunted travelers, feeding on their fear. I tried to dismiss it, but the memory anchored itself, a weight that pressed against my chest. You escaped, I told myself, but the truth was, we hadn't. Not really. The man was gone, but the fear he'd planted followed us, a shadow that would linger in every dark corner, every quiet night. We never spoke of it again. Not really. But I saw it in Luca's eyes, in Marco's silence. We'd left the path, but something had followed us out, and it wasn't done with us yet. To this day, I can't walk a lonely path without feeling that prickle at the base of my skull, that sense of being watched. The hike from Graz to Venice was meant to be an adventure, a story to tell, but it became a scar, a reminder that the world holds things we can't explain, things that hunt in the dark. Check behind you, my mind whispers, even now, years later, in the safety of my room. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I swear I hear the crunch of gravel, steady, unhurried, coming closer. Christmas lights twinkled across the city, promising a night of joy at the ice skating rink downtown. But something gnawed at me, a whisper of unease I couldn't shake, like a shadow, lurking just beyond the glow of holiday cheer. At 14, I was thrilled to share this evening with my family. Mom, my stepfather, my 2 younger brothers, and my girlfriend Emily, who'd just arrived at our house. The rink was a seasonal gem, open only during Christmas, and the thought of gliding across the ice with Emily's hand in mine filled me with a warmth that rivaled the hot cocoa we'd soon sip. The drive downtown was a blur of chatter and holiday tunes humming through the car's speakers. My brothers bickered over who'd skate the fastest, while Emily squeezed my hand, her eyes sparkling with nervous excitement. She'd never skated before, and I teased her gently, promising to catch her if she fell. The city glowed under a blanket of festive lights, and as we circled the rink's crowded parking lot, I felt the pulse of anticipation. We finally found a spot, and as we stepped out into the cold, the rink came alive before us, a shimmering expanse of ice framed by a festive glow. But that gnawing feeling lingered a subtle discord beneath the holiday magic. The rink was packed bodies, weaving in graceful arcs, their laughter mingling with the jingle of bells from a nearby vendor. My brothers darted toward the cocoa booth, tugging Mom along, while Emily and I headed to the rental window. The line was short, and we quickly secured our skates, sitting on a bench to lace them up. Emily fumbled with hers, her fingers trembling from nerves, or the cold, or maybe something else? Something I couldn't yet name. I reassured her, my voice steady, but my eyes kept darting to the rink, where the lights flickered briefly, casting odd shadows that seemed to move against the flow of skaters. The rink's atmosphere was electric, charged with the joy of families and couples. Yet I couldn't shake the sense that something watched us, its gaze heavy and unseen. I pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to the chill or my overactive imagination. We stood wobbly on our skates and made our way to the ice's edge. The rink gleamed under bright white lights, reflecting the festive spirit. But as we stepped forward, the air seemed to thicken, the laughter around us growing distant, as if the world held its breath. Feel the ice beneath you. I told myself, it's just a night of fun. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. A primal instinct screaming that this night would not end as we planned. The ice was slick beneath my blades, and Emily clung to my arm, her laughter shaky but genuine as we found our rhythm. The rink was a whirlwind of motion kids, darting past couples, spinning in lazy circles, the air filled with the hum of blades carving ice. I glanced at my family on the benches sipping cocoa, their faces lit with warmth. This is what Christmas is about, I thought, letting the moment anchor me. But then the lights shifted. The bright white glow dimmed, replaced by a haunting mix of green and red, casting the rink in an eerie, festive haze. Shadows stretched across the ice, twisting into shapes that didn't match the skaters' movements. Emily tightened her grip, her voice trembling. "It's darker than it should be, don't you think?" I nodded, my pulse quickening. The lights were too dim, the colors too muted, swallowing details in a murky glow. Skaters bumped into each other, their laughter turning to confused murmurs. I scanned the crowd, searching for my family, and spotted a man in a dark red trench coat stepping onto the ice. His hood obscured his face, but something about his posture, rigid, deliberate, sent a chill down my spine. "Don't look at him," a voice in my head warned, but my eyes lingered, drawn to the way he moved, as if he belonged to the shadows themselves. The lights flickered again, plunging the rink into near darkness. Emily's nails dug into my arm, her breath hitching. "Let's wait for the lights to come back," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing unease of the crowd. We stood still, the ice cold beneath us, as the festive music slowed, distorted, like a record played too slow. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest, and I felt that unseen gaze, again sharper now, as if it had found me. I tried to focus on Emily, on the warmth of her hand, but the darkness seemed to pulse alive with something malevolent. A minute later, the lights snapped back to white, and a collective sigh rippled through the rink. Emily's face relaxed, but her eyes still darted nervously. We started skating again, my heart pounding as I tried to shake the feeling that we were being watched. The man in the trench coat was gone, or so I thought, but the crowd felt different now, less like a celebration and more like a gathering of strangers, each unaware of the danger lurking just out of sight. "Keep moving," I told myself. "Don't let the fear take hold." But as we circled the rink, the lights dimmed again, darker this time, and a scream pierced the air, sharp and raw, shattering the illusion of safety. The darkness swallowed everything, a void so thick it felt like drowning. The scream hung in the air, a woman's voice raw with terror, before it was cut off abruptly. The rink, moments ago, alive with holiday cheer, descended into chaos. The lights were gone. Not even the green and red glow remained, just an oppressive black that pressed against my eyes. Emily's hand clamped onto mine, her breath ragged. "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. I couldn't answer. My own heart thundered, drowning out thought. Another scream. This time, a man's erupted nearby, followed by the sickening sound of bodies, colliding blades, scraping ice in frantic desperation. We stumbled forward, trying to stay upright, as skaters crashed around us. The air was thick with panic. The once festive rink now a maze of fear. I felt Emily's weight shift as we collided with a group, our legs tangling, and we fell hard onto the ice. The cold bit into my palms, sharp as knives, and I heard Emily call my name, her voice laced with terror. "Get up," my mind screamed. "You have to move." But the darkness was disorienting, a living thing that coiled around us, amplifying every sound. Grunts, cries, the sickening thud of bodies hitting ice. Another scream, piercing and desperate, came from the far side of the rink. It wasn't just panic. It was agony, the kind that chills your blood and makes your body freeze. I scrambled to my knees, pulling Emily with me, but the ice was slick with something warm blood, I realized, with a jolt. My hands slid across it, the metallic scent filling my nose, twisting my stomach. This isn't happening, I told myself. But the screams grew louder, a chorus of terror that drowned out reason. I called for Emily, my voice hoarse, but she didn't answer. Her hand slipped from mine, and the darkness swallowed her presence. I crawled my hands, burning against the ice, my breath coming in sharp gasps. Another skater slammed into me, their knee striking my face, sending stars across my vision. I tasted blood, my own, or someone else's. I couldn't tell. The rink was a battlefield, invisible in the dark, and I was alone, surrounded by the sounds of fear and pain. Find the wall. I thought, a desperate anchor in the chaos. My fingers brushed the rink's edge, a fleeting moment of relief. But then another scream, closer this time, made my heart lurch. It was Emily's voice. I was sure of it, and it broke something inside me, urging me to move faster to find her before it was too late. Pain seared through my hand, a white-hot agony that tore a cry from my throat. Something sharp. Another skater's blade had sliced the tip of my middle finger, and I felt warm blood pulse from the wound slick against the ice. I clutched my hand, the pain grounding me in the chaos, a brutal reminder that this was no nightmare. The darkness pressed closer, suffocating as screams echoed around me, each one a dagger to my heart. I called for Emily again, my voice cracking, but the cacophony of panic drowned me out. "She's out there. I thought you have to find her." I crawled along the wall, my hands slipping in blood, mine others. I didn't know. The rink was a slaughterhouse, the air thick with the coppery stench and the desperate gasps of those trying to escape. My thigh burned as another blade grazed it, a shallow cut, but enough to make me grit my teeth. I reached out blindly, searching for Emily, my mind racing with images of her lying somewhere hurt, or worse. Don't think that I commanded myself, but the fear was relentless, clawing at my insides. The rink, once a place of joy, was now a trap, and I was caught in its jaws. A sudden impact sent me sprawling bodies piling on top of me, their weight crushing the air from my lungs. I struggled my hands, sliding across the ice, now a slick pool of blood and fear. Someone's skate caught my back, and a new pain erupted sharp and deep, unlike anything I'd ever felt. At first, I thought it was another accidental cut, but as I twisted, reaching back, my fingers found a wound too precise, too deliberate. Someone stabbed me. The realization hit like a thunderbolt, and panic surged my breath, coming in shallow, ragged bursts. The pain grew a fire spreading through my body, threatening to consume me. I crawled again, weaker now, my muscles trembling as the blood loss took its toll. The screams around me blurred into a single deafening wail, and I felt my strength fading, my body heavy, as if sinking into the ice. Emily. I thought her name an anchor, a reason to keep moving. But my hands, slick with blood, slipped, and I collapsed, my face pressed against the cold. I coughed blood, filling my mouth, choking me. The darkness was closing in, not just the absence of light, but something deeper pulling me under. Stay awake, I begged myself, but my eyes fluttered, and the world began to fade, leaving only the echo of screams and the weight of loss. I woke to sterile white walls, the beep of machines, a stark contrast to the chaos of the rink. My body ached, every movement, a reminder of the wounds my finger, my thigh, the deep gash in my back. The hospital room was quiet, too quiet, and the absence of Emily's voice was a wound deeper than any blade. She's gone. The thought hit me before the doctor's words confirmed it. 24 people had died that night, including Emily, in a massacre that left the city reeling. The police had no answers, only questions, and the man in the red trench coat was a ghost vanishing into the night, like the darkness that had consumed us. Days blurred into weeks, each one heavy with grief. I replayed that night in my mind, the dim lights, the screams, the blood. Why didn't I hold her tighter? The question haunted me, a relentless specter that followed me through sleepless nights. My family tried to comfort me, but their words felt hollow, unable to bridge the chasm of loss. The rink was closed, the festive lights torn down, but the memory of that night clung to me a shadow I couldn't escape. I saw Emily in every reflection, her nervous smile, her hand in mine, now forever out of reach. The police found no trace of the attacker, no motive, no weapon. Rumors swirled. Some said it was a deranged skater, Others whispered of something darker, something that thrived in the chaos of that night. I didn't know what to believe, only that the rink had become a place of nightmares, its ice stained with more than blood. You survived for a reason, I told myself, but the reason felt cruel, a life sentence of carrying that night's horror. I avoided mirrors, afraid to see my own eyes, afraid they'd reflect the terror I'd seen in hers. Years later, I still feel the cold of that ice, the weight of the darkness. I walk past the rink sometimes, now a shuttered relic, and the air grows heavy, as if the screams still linger. Don't look back, I tell myself, but I do, searching for her, for answers. The man in the trench coat, the darkness, the blood, they are part of me now, etched into my soul. I live for her, carrying her memory, but the fear remains a silent promise that some horrors never fade, lurking just beyond the light, waiting for the next Christmas night to claim their due. In the summer of 1975, the air in the industrial district of the West Coast city clung to Cece's skin like a damp, heavy shroud, thick with the scent of oil and asphalt. At 17, Cece was a spark in a world of grit, her laughter echoing through the car dealership where she worked as a receptionist. Her job was a badge of pride, a step toward independence, a chance to save for an apartment far from the small-town life she'd left behind. The dealership, a sprawling lot of gleaming chrome and polished hoods, was her father's domain, where he toiled as a mechanic, his hands stained with grease, his pride in his daughter unspoken but evident in every glance. Cece's days were filled with chatter, her gift of gab turning strangers into friends, her blonde curls bouncing as she moved through the showroom, answering phones, greeting customers, and occasionally ferrying cash deposits to the nearby bank. This task, though routine, was a quiet burden. The bank was a short walk away, through a stretch of cracked pavement, flanked by warehouses and empty lots, a landscape that felt more like a ghost town than a bustling city. Each day, Cece carried thousands of dollars in cash, $3,000 on this particular summer afternoon, a sum that could buy a car outright in 1975, a fortune that weighed heavily in her purse. She never questioned the responsibility. It was a testament to her employer's trust, a nod to her reliability. But trust, she would soon learn, was a fragile thing in a world that preyed on the unwary. The sun beat down mercilessly as Cece stepped out of the dealership, the cash tucked securely in her purse, her steps quick but not rushed. The street was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made the hairs on her neck prickle as if the world was holding its breath. She adjusted her purse strap, her fingers brushing the worn leather, and told herself it was just another walk. But something was watching. The air seemed to thicken, the heat pressing against her chest, her pulse quickening without reason. She glanced over her shoulder, seeing nothing but the empty road stretching back to the dealership. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a memory from childhood. Stay sharp, Cece. The world ain't always kind. She shook it off, blaming the heat, the monotony, but the unease clung to her like a shadow. As she rounded a corner, the screech of tires shattered the silence. A rusty van, its paint peeling like dead skin, lurched to a stop behind her. Before she could turn, the sliding door flew open, and rough hands grabbed her, yanking her into the dark interior. The world tilted, her screams stifled by a calloused palm. The door slammed shut, sealing her in a coffin of metal and despair. Her purse fell to the floor, the cash inside a silent witness to her fate. You're trapped. Now? A voice in her head whispered, cold and final. Her heart pounded each beat, a hammer against her ribs, as the van roared to life and sped away, carrying her into an abyss of uncertainty. Inside, the air was sour, thick, with the stench of beer and sweat. 5 men, their faces hardened by lives, Cece could only imagine filled the cramped space. The back seats were gone, replaced by a stained mattress and scattered pillows, a grotesque parody of comfort. Their laughter grated against her ears, sharp and predatory, as they shoved her onto the mattress. We wanted a pretty girl for the party, one of them sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. Cece's mind raced her body, frozen, every instinct screaming to fight to flee, but her limbs refused to obey. The van's engine rumbled like a beast, drowning out the world outside, leaving only the suffocating reality of her captivity. The van's interior was a nightmare made real, a claustrophobic prison where every detail burned into Cece's memory. The mattress beneath her was damp, its fabric reeking of mildew and stale beer clinging to her skin like a living thing. Empty cans rattled across the floor with every jolt of the van, their metallic clinks a mocking rhythm to her terror. The men loomed over her, their faces a gallery of cruelty, scarred cheeks, crooked teeth, eyes that held no warmth. One of them, with a beard like tangled wire, leaned close, his breath hot and rancid, whispering words that made her stomach churn. You're ours now, sweetheart. The others laughed, a sound that clawed at her nerves, each chuckle a reminder of her vulnerability. Cece's mind spun, grasping for something, anything to anchor her. Don't panic, she told herself, her father's voice echoing again. Fear clouds your head, Cece. stay clear. But clarity was hard to find in this suffocating darkness. The van's walls seemed to close in the air, growing heavier, as if the vehicle itself was complicit in her capture. Her purse lay just out of reach, the cash inside a dangerous secret. If they found it, $3,000 more money than they might see in months could turn this from a cruel prank into something far worse. They don't know about the money. She realized, a flicker of hope in the storm of dread. She had to keep it that way. Her eyes darted around, cataloging details through the haze of fear. The driver, a hulking figure with a shaved head, kept his gaze on the road, his silence more menacing than the others' taunts. Another man, wiry and jittery, toyed with a knife, its blade catching the dim light filtering through a cracked window. The others sprawled across the mattress, passing a bottle, their movements sluggish but unpredictable. Cece's heart thudded each beat, a countdown to an unknown fate. You have to think, she commanded herself, her mind clawing for a way out. She remembered her sisters, their hair cut short to avoid resembling Ted Bundy's, victims of precaution, born of the fear gripping the West Coast. That fear, she realized, could be her weapon. She forced a smile, her lips trembling, but resolute. "You guys seem pretty cool," she said, her voice steady despite the terror gnawing at her insides. The words felt like shards of glass in her throat, but she pushed on. "It's too bad I can't stay. My boss is strict, you know. He'll call the cops if I'm not back soon." The men paused their laughter, faltering uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Cece seized the moment, her voice growing bolder. "With all that's been happening lately, he'll think something's wrong. You don't want that kind of trouble, do you?" She let the name linger unspoken. Ted Bundy, the shadow haunting every woman's mind in 1975. The air shifted the men, exchanging glances, their bravado cracking under the weight of her words. The van slowed the driver, muttering something under his breath. Cece's pulse raced, her senses overwhelmed by the stench, the heat, the oppressive closeness of her captors. "Keep talking," she urged herself, her gift of gab, now a lifeline. "My dad's waiting for me too. He's not the kind to sit still if I'm late." She painted a picture of consequences, of police of a city, on edge, her words weaving a net of doubt around the men. The knife-wielding man hesitated, his grip loosening, and Cece felt a spark of control, fragile but real. "You're not helpless," she told herself, anchoring her courage to the memory of her father's pride, her sister's laughter, the life she refused to lose. Cece's voice was her only weapon, a fragile thread holding back the darkness. The van rumbled on its tires, humming a grim lullaby against the pavement, each mile stretching her fear to the breaking point. The men's eyes bored into her, searching for weakness, but she met their gazes with a defiance she didn't fully feel. "I mean it," she continued, her tone light, almost playful, a stark contrast to the terror churning in her gut. "My boss is a real hard-ass. If I'm not back soon, he'll have the whole city looking for me." She leaned into the lie, her words a calculated dance, each step designed to plant seeds of doubt. Pattern, interruption. She laughed, a bright, disarming sound that cut through their menacing silence, forcing them to rethink their control. The bearded man tilted his head, his eyes narrowing, but Cece didn't flinch. Sensory overload. She painted vivid images of police sirens, flashing lights, the weight of a city's fear descending on them. "You know how it is out there," she said, her voice low, conspiratorial. "They're jumpy about girls going missing. You don't want to be the ones they pin it on." The mention of Ted Bundy hung unspoken, but heavy a specter that made the men shift uncomfortably. The wiry one with the knife stopped twirling it, his fingers twitching as if the blade had suddenly grown too hot to hold. Cece's heart pounded, but she kept her face serene, her blonde curls framing a mask of confidence she barely recognized. Nested, storytelling. She let slip a story half true, half invented, about a friend who'd vanished last summer. Her name splashed across newspapers, her face on every telephone pole. "They caught the guy in a week," she said, her eyes locking with the driver's in the rearview mirror. He didn't think anyone would notice either. The lie was seamless, woven from the fear that gripped the West Coast, and it worked. The men's laughter died, replaced by a tense silence. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel, his knuckles white, and Cece felt the van's pace slow. A hesitation that mirrored the doubt in their eyes. "You're winning," she told herself, but the victory was precarious. A tightrope over an abyss. The mattress beneath her seemed to pulse with the van's movement, its damp fabric a constant reminder of her vulnerability. The air was stifling, the stench of beer and sweat, mingling with the faint metallic tang of fear, hers, theirs. It didn't matter. Trance loop. She kept talking, her voice a steady rhythm, lulling them into a false sense of control while she chipped away at their resolve. "I'd hate for us all to get in trouble," she said, her tone almost regretful. "I mean, you guys seem like you're just having fun, right? No need for this to go south." The words were a spell, binding them to her narrative, making them question their own intentions. The van turned onto a quieter street, the city's hum fading into a distant drone. Cece's senses sharpened every detail, a potential lifeline. The creak of the van's frame, the flicker of a street light through the window, the way the bearded man's hand hovered near his pocket as if weighing his options. Anchoring. She clung to the memory of her father's smile, the warmth of her sister's laughter, grounding herself in the life she refused to let slip away. "Let me go," she said softly, an embedded command buried in her plea. "You don't want this kind of trouble." The driver cursed under his breath, and for the first time, Cece felt the balance tip the predator's confidence, wavering under the weight of her words. The van stopped abruptly, its engine idling, like a beast catching its breath. Cece's heart surged hope and fear, colliding in a dizzying rush. The men were silent now, their earlier bravado replaced by a tense, uneasy stillness. The driver turned his face a mask of frustration and muttered something to the bearded man, who nodded curtly. "Get her out." He growled, his voice low, but laced with defeat. Cece's breath caught her body, trembling, as the wiry man opened the sliding door, the night air rushing in like a lifeline. "You're almost free," she told herself, but the fear didn't loosen its grip. Not yet. She stepped out onto the pavement, her legs unsteady, the weight of her purse a reminder of the danger still hidden inside. The men didn't look at her, their eyes fixed on the ground, the dashboard, anywhere but her face. They're afraid, she realized, a surge of triumph cutting through her terror. She'd turned their game against them, her words a weapon sharper than their knife. The grocery store across the street glowed faintly, its neon sign a beacon in the darkness. Cece clutched her purse and ran her footsteps pounding against the asphalt, each step a declaration of survival. "Don't look back," she commanded herself, her father's voice echoing. "Keep moving, Cece. Always keep moving." Inside the store, she stumbled to the counter, her breath ragged, her hands shaking as she dialed her father's number. The cashier, an older woman with tired eyes, watched her with concern, but asked no questions. Cece's voice broke as she spoke to her father, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Van men danger, money." He was there in minutes, his truck screeching into the parking lot, his arms wrapping around her in a fierce embrace. The police were called, but their response was tepid, a product of an era where a young woman's fear was often dismissed as hysteria. No license plate, no clear descriptions, no arrests, just a report, filed and forgotten. But Cece didn't care. She was alive, the cash still in her purse, her spirit unbroken. The ordeal left scars invisible but deep. Cece never walked that route again, her steps more cautious, her eyes always scanning the shadows. But it didn't dim her fire. She went on to travel the world, her camera capturing moments of beauty and resilience, her gift of gab forging friendships across cultures. The van, the men, the mattress, they became a story she told not of victimhood, but of survival, nested storytelling. She'd recount it to friends over coffee, her voice steady, her eyes bright with the knowledge that she'd faced the abyss and walked away. The memory of that summer day was a weight she carried, but also a reminder. Danger lurks in routine, in trust in the quiet moments when you least expect it. Anchoring. Cece anchored her courage to that moment, to the sound of her own voice defying the darkness. She taught others to stay sharp, to never let routine blind them to the world's edges. The West Coast summer of 1975 was a crucible forging her into a woman who could face fear and come out stronger. You survived. She'd whisper to herself in quiet moments the words a mantra, a shield against the shadows that lingered in her dreams. And in those dreams, she was never alone. Her father's pride, her sister's laughter, her own unyielding spirit stood guard, ensuring she'd never be a victim again. It was as if the house exhaled a cold breath the moment I stepped inside, a whisper of something ancient and watchful seeping from the walls. The air felt thick, heavy with the scent of dust and forgotten summers clinging to my skin like a second shadow. I'd only been in this sprawling, temporary home for a few hours, a favor to a family member who'd left it empty for months. The place was a labyrinth of creaking floorboards and looming doorways, tucked at the end of a long, winding driveway that seemed to swallow the world outside. It was remote, too remote, the kind of isolation that made you feel like the only soul left on earth. I told myself it was just a house, just wood and plaster, but my gut churned with a warning I couldn't name. I was unpacking in the main hallway, my hands buried in a box of mismatched dishes, when the doorbell shattered the silence. It wasn't a gentle chime, but a harsh, jarring clang that echoed like a scream in a cave. My heart lurched, and I froze, staring at the door. This house was too far out for casual visitors. No neighbors, no delivery drivers, no reason for anyone to be here. I edged toward the door, my boots scuffing against the warped oak floor, and peered through the peephole. An old woman stood there, her face blurred by the warped glass, but something about her was off. She was tall, unnaturally, so her frame stretching upward like a shadow cast by a dying fire. Her clothes hung loosely, as if they belonged to someone else, and her posture was rigid, like a marionette waiting for its strings to be pulled. I opened the door, the hinges groaning in protest, and she smiled a wide, toothy grin that stretched her face into something almost inhuman. "I'm from the neighborhood council," she said, her voice a soft rasp barely audible, like leaves skittering across pavement. Her handshake was cold, her fingers bony and long, wrapping around mine with a grip that lingered too long. She asked to come inside, and though every instinct screamed to slam the door, I couldn't find a reason to refuse. What could she do? I thought, trying to silence the dread pooling in my chest. She was just an old woman, after all. But as she stepped inside, the air seemed to curdle, and the house felt smaller, as if it were closing in around us. She tottered behind me into the living room, her steps uneven, like her feet didn't quite fit her shoes. I offered her a seat, and she sank into the armchair without asking, her grin never wavering. For 30 seconds, she said nothing, just stared, her eyes glinting like polished glass in the dim light. The silence was suffocating, pressing against my temples, and I felt the urge to speak, to fill the void, but my tongue felt heavy, useless. Say something, my mind urged, but the words wouldn't come. Then, breaking the trance, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a candy, wrapped in crinkled cellophane, dark red, almost black, like congealed blood. "Eat this," she whispered, nodding eagerly, her grin widening until it seemed to split her face. I took the candy, my fingers trembling, and unwrapped it. The smell hit me first, rancid, like meat left to rot in a summer dumpster, thick and oily, coating my throat. I hesitated, but her eyes bore into me, unblinking, and I popped it into my mouth. The taste was worse than the smell, a vile mix of decay and sweetness that made my stomach churn. I gagged, forcing it down, while she watched her head, tilted her smile, unchanging. She started talking, her voice so low I could barely hear it over the pounding in my ears. I excused myself to get water, fleeing to the kitchen, my mouth burning with the aftertaste of rot. When I returned, she was gone. The living room was empty, the armchair still indented from her weight, but the door hadn't opened, and the house was silent. She couldn't have left that fast. I thought, my pulse racing. I searched every room, every closet, every shadow, convinced I'd find her grinning face lurking somewhere. But she was gone, and the house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The floorboards groaned under my feet, a low, mournful sound, as if the house itself were warning me to stop searching. I checked every corner, every shadowed nook, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness like a blade. The house was too big, too old, its hallways twisting into dead ends and rooms that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I told myself she'd slipped out while I was in the kitchen, but the math didn't add up. 30 seconds wasn't enough time to vanish. Not without a sound, not in a house this isolated. My skin prickled as I moved the air, growing colder with every step, as if I were walking deeper into a grave. I returned to the living room, my breath shallow, and sank into the couch, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just an old lady, probably senile, wandering where she shouldn't. But the candy's taste lingered a foul anchor in my throat, and her grin haunted me, etched into my mind like a scar. I turned on every light, hoping to banish the unease. But the bulbs flickered, casting long, jagged shadows that danced across the walls. The house felt alive. Its silence, not empty, but heavy, like it was listening, waiting. I tried to focus on unpacking, but my hands shook, and every creak of the floor made me flinch. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the windows turned black, reflecting my own pale face back at me. I avoided looking at them, afraid of what else I might see. I propped a chair against my bedroom door, a flimsy barrier against the unknown, and tried to sleep, but the house wouldn't let me. At 2:30 a.m., I jolted awake, my heart hammering. The floorboards downstairs creaked, slow and deliberate, like footsteps pacing with purpose. I held my breath, straining to hear, but the sound stopped as suddenly as it began. It's just the house settling, I told myself, but the lie felt hollow. I lay there, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling, every nerve screaming that I wasn't alone. Then I saw it, a candy identical to the one she'd given me, sitting on the nightstand. I hadn't put it there. I'd searched the house twice, top to bottom, and found nothing. My stomach twisted, and I reached for it, my hand trembling. The wrapper crinkled under my fingers, the sound deafening in the silence. I didn't dare open it, didn't dare taste that rot again. I threw it across the room, and it landed with a soft thud, rolling into the shadows. "You're imagining things," I whispered, but the words felt like a plea, not a fact. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained the woman, the candy, the noises. They came, searched the house, and found nothing. No candy, no footprints, no sign of her. They said the neighborhood council didn't exist, their eyes pitying, like I was some paranoid fool. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd overlooked the candy. Maybe she was just a confused old lady who wandered off. But deep down, I knew better. The house felt different now, like it was hers, not mine. Every shadow seemed to hold her grin, every creak, her uneven steps. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still here, hiding in the walls, waiting for me to let my guard down. I slept with the lights on the chair against the door, but sleep was a battle I couldn't win. The house was watching me, and so was she. The darkness pressed against my eyes, thick and suffocating, like a hand clamped over my mouth. I woke abruptly, my body rigid, the air in the room so heavy it felt like it could crush me. The clock read 2:47 a.m. But time meant nothing in this house. It stretched and warped each second, a lifetime of dread. I lay still, my heart pounding so loud, I was sure it would betray me to whatever lurked in the shadows. The chair was still propped against the door, its silhouette a faint outline in the dim glow of my bedside lamp. But the silence was wrong, too perfect, like the world had stopped breathing. Then it came a creak, slow and deliberate, from the hallway. Not the house settling, not the wind. This was purposeful, a weight shifting on the floorboards, testing their strength. My breath caught, and I stared at the door, willing it to hold. Another creak closer now, and then a soft scrape, like fingernails, trailing along the wall. She's here, my mind screamed, and the memory of her grin flashed before my eyes, wide and hungry, promising something unspeakable. I wanted to move, to scream, to do anything. But my body was frozen, pinned by fear, so primal. It felt like it was carved into my bones. I don't know how long I lay there, counting the creaks, each one a step closer to my door. Then a shadow moved under the gap, thin and elongated like her unnatural frame. It lingered, swaying slightly, as if she were standing just outside her head, tilted, listening. "Open the door," a voice in my head whispered, soft and insidious, not my own. "See what she wants." I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voice grew louder, curling around my thoughts like smoke. "Open it. You want to know." I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for dawn, for light, for anything to break this spell. When I opened my eyes, she was there, inside my room, standing at the foot of my bed, her tall, spindly form bathed in shadow, her grin glowing in the dark. Her eyes were voids black and endless, sucking in the light. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, her presence a violation of everything safe and real. My scream lodged in my throat, and I scrambled back my back, hitting the headboard. The chair was still against the door. How had she gotten in? Her head tilted, and she raised a hand, holding another candy, its wrapper glinting like a predator's eyes. "Eat this," she whispered, her voice a hiss that slithered into my skull. I don't remember grabbing the phone, but suddenly I was dialing. My fingers fumbling, no signal, no internet. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in her presence, filling every corner. I threw the phone and lunged for the window, the drop outside, my only chance. But her laughter stopped me, a low, guttural sound, like gravel grinding in her throat. I turned, and she was gone. The room empty, the chair untouched. But the candy was on my pillow now, its wrapper torn open, the stench of rot filling the air. I didn't sleep again that night. I couldn't. She was still there, somewhere watching. The house was no longer a house. It was a cage, and I was its prey. Dawn broke gray and weak, the light barely penetrating the windows. I hadn't slept, hadn't moved from the corner of my room where I'd curled up, clutching a kitchen knife I'd grabbed in a haze of panic. The candy still sat on my pillow, its wrapper a taunt, a promise of something I couldn't comprehend. Every sound, the drip of a faucet, the creak of a pipe, felt like her circling, waiting. I had to get out. I had to leave this place before it swallowed me whole. I crept downstairs, the knife trembling in my hand, my eyes darting to every shadow. The living room was unchanged, but the air was wrong, thick with that same rancid smell. I checked the front door, locked, chained just as I'd left it. But as I reached for the bolt, a sound stopped me. Rapid, uneven footsteps from upstairs, like someone or something half running, half falling. Down the hall, my heart seized, and I fumbled with the lock, my hands slick with sweat. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then a high-pitched shriek tore through the house, a sound so raw it felt like it was clawing at my soul. I yanked the door open, the chain snapping under the force, and sprinted into the morning air. The driveway stretched endlessly before me, the trees looming like silent witnesses. I didn't look back, couldn't, but I felt her eyes on me, boring into my back, her grin stretching wider with every step I took. I ran to the nearest neighbor, a mile away, pounding on their door until they let me in their faces, pale as I babbled about the woman, the candy, the house. They called the police, who found nothing. No footprints, no candy, no sign of her. The house was empty, they said, but I knew better. It wasn't empty. It was hers. I'm staying with a friend now, sleeping with the lights on a chair against the door. But the fear follows me, a shadow I can't shake. I see her grin in every dark corner, smell that rot in every quiet moment. The police think I'm crazy, but I know what I saw, what I felt. That house isn't a home. It's a trap, an infestation, and she's still there, waiting for someone else to walk through that door. I dream of her, sometimes, standing at the edge of my vision, holding that candy, whispering my name. "Eat this," she says, and I wake up screaming, the taste of rot still on my tongue. I'll never go back to that house, but deep down, I'm terrified she didn't stay there. What if she followed me? What if she's here now, watching? The wind howled like a grieving widow, clawing at the car windows as we twisted through the snow-dusted mountains, each gust a warning I couldn't yet comprehend. It was the winter of 1996, and I was 9 years old, bundled in the back seat with my 7-year-old sister, Sarah, as our parents navigated the treacherous roads to our family's cabin in the remote wilderness. The tires crunched against the icy gravel, a rhythm that lulled me into a half-sleep, my breath fogging the cold glass. We'd been to this cabin before 3, maybe 4 times always in summer, when the air buzzed with crickets and the forest felt alive, welcoming. But this trip was different. Winter had stripped the trees bare, their skeletal branches scraping the sky like desperate fingers. The isolation felt heavier, the darkness thicker, as if the world beyond the car had swallowed itself whole. Dad's voice broke the silence, gruff but warm. "Almost there, kids. Gonna be a cozy night by the fire." Mom turned in her seat, her smile soft, but strained her eyes, darting to the rearview mirror, as if checking for something behind us. Sarah clutched her stuffed rabbit, whispering to it, her small voice barely audible over the wind. I pressed my forehead against the window, the cold biting my skin, and tried to shake the unease creeping up my spine. Something's watching us, I thought, but I pushed it away. Just a kid's imagination. Right? Kids always invent monsters in the dark. When we finally pulled up to the cabin, the headlights carved a pale arc across its wooden facade. It looked smaller than I remembered, crouched low under the weight of the snow-laden pines. Dad hauled our bags inside, while Mom tucked Sarah and me into the twin beds in the smaller bedroom. The air smelled of damp wood and old blankets, a faint mustiness that clung to everything. "Sleep tight," Mom said, her voice a forced calm as she kissed my forehead. I nodded, but my eyes lingered on the window, where the blackness outside seemed to press against the glass, hungry to get in. as Dad built a fire in the living room. The crackling logs offered some comfort, but not enough. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing like specters in the dim light. Sarah was already asleep, her soft snores a fragile anchor in the quiet. Then it came, a sound that sliced through the stillness like a blade. A loud, deliberate bang on the front door, sharp enough to rattle the walls. My heart lurched. Sarah stirred, but didn't wake. I sat up, clutching the blanket, my ears straining. Dad's footsteps thudded across the floor, heavy and cautious. "Who's there?" He called, his voice low-edged with something I'd never heard before. Fear. He peered through the keyhole, then opened the door. The cold rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and something else, something sour, like wet earth and decay. Nothing. He muttered, closing the door with a heavy thud. Probably just an animal. But his eyes didn't meet Mom's when he said it, and I saw her hands tremble as she poured tea in the kitchen. An animal doesn't knock like that. I thought my mind spiraling. I imagined a bear, a wolf, something with claws and teeth circling the cabin. But deep down, I knew it wasn't an animal. It was something else, something that didn't belong in the world. I understood. I lay back down, my pulse hammering in my ears. The cabin felt smaller, now the walls closing in the darkness outside, growing thicker, more alive. I told myself to sleep, to forget the sound, but my eyes kept darting to the window. "Don't look," a voice in my head whispered. "Don't look, or it'll see you." But the urge was too strong a pull. I couldn't resist. I glanced at the glass, expecting nothing but the void of night. Instead, I saw it, a faint shape, just beyond the light, watching. My breath caught, and I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was just a trick of the mind. But the air grew heavier, the silence louder, and I knew whatever was out there wasn't gone. It was waiting. The darkness wasn't just outside. It was inside, seeping through the cracks, curling around my heart like a cold hand. The bang on the door lingered in my mind, a splinter I couldn't pull out. For the next few days, the cabin felt like a trap, its cozy charm replaced by a suffocating tension. The days were quiet, filled with board games and Mom's forced cheer, but the nights were different. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual hum of wildlife replaced by an unnatural silence that pressed against my ears. I'd lie awake, listening for something, anything to break it. But all I got was the creak of the cabin, settling each sound, twisting into footsteps in my imagination. Sarah didn't seem to notice. She'd chatter about the snow, build tiny snowmen in the yard, and fall asleep without a care. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I'd catch Mom glancing at the windows, her lips tight, or Dad pausing mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on the door. "Just the wind," he'd say, when the lights flickered, but his voice lacked conviction. Once I heard them whispering in the kitchen after we'd gone to bed, their voices low and urgent. "It's nothing," Mom said, but Dad's reply was too soft to hear, and the fear in her tone made my stomach twist. One night, I woke to a scratching sound, faint but deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. It came from the wall behind my bed, slow and rhythmic, as if something was testing the barrier between us. I froze, my breath shallow, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. "It's just the house," I told myself, but the sound grew louder, more insistent, like a message I was too scared to decipher. I wanted to wake Sarah, but she was curled up, oblivious, her rabbit tucked under her chin. I envied her ignorance, her ability to sleep through the creeping dread that kept me awake. The next day, I stayed close to Dad, watching him chop wood outside. The air was crisp, the snow crunching under his boots, but the forest felt wrong too still. "Dad?" I said, my voice small. "Did you hear anything last night?" He paused, his axe hovering mid-swing, then shook his head. "Just the wind, kiddo. Old cabins make noises." But his eyes didn't meet mine, and I saw his grip tighten on the axe handle. I wanted to believe him, but the memory of that bang, that scratching, gnawed at me. What if it's not the wind? What if it's something else? That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed every sound except the pounding of my heart. I stared at the window, the curtains half open, revealing a sliver of night. The moonlight cast long shadows, twisting the familiar into the grotesque. Then I heard it again. A soft thud, not as loud as the first night, but closer, more intimate, like something brushing against the cabin's outer wall. My skin prickled, every nerve screaming to hide, to run, to do anything but lie there. But I was frozen, caught in a trance of fear, my mind looping through the same thought. It's coming closer. It knows we're here. I don't know how long I lay there, my body rigid, my eyes locked on the window. The air grew colder, the room darker, as if the moonlight itself was retreating. Then I saw it, a shadow, tall and thin, moving just beyond the glass. It wasn't a tree, not a trick of the light. It was deliberate, purposeful, a silhouette that seemed to absorb the darkness around it. My breath hitched, and I pulled the blanket over my head, a child's shield against the unknown. Don't look, I told myself, but the image was burned into my mind, a shape that didn't belong. Watching, waiting, biding its time. It wasn't human. Not anymore. The shadow at the window haunted me, a specter that followed me into every quiet moment. The next night, I begged Mom to let me sleep in their room, but she brushed it off, saying I was too old for that. "It's just a cabin, sweetheart," she said, tucking me in. But her hands shook, and I saw her glance at the window before leaving the room. Sarah was already asleep, her soft snores a cruel reminder of my own sleepless terror. I lay there, the blanket pulled tight, my eyes darting between the door and the window, waiting for the next sound, the next sign. It came just after midnight. The silence was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the life from the room. Then, a faint creak, like weight shifting on the porch. My heart pounded a drumbeat in my chest as I stared at the window. The curtains swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. It's here, I thought, my mind spiraling into a loop of panic. It's here, and it wants in. I wanted to scream, to wake Sarah, to run to Dad, but my body betrayed me, locked in place by a fear so primal. It felt like it was carved into my bones. Then I saw it. A face pressed against the glass, its skin gray as ash stretched tight over sharp bones. Its eyes were pits of black, endless voids that seemed to pull me in, drowning me in their emptiness. But the worst was its smile, a gaping, unnatural grin that stretched too wide, splitting its face in a mockery of joy. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared its gaze, boring into me like a drill. My breath stopped, my body numb, as if the air itself had turned to ice. It sees me. It knows I see it. I don't know how long we stayed like that, locked in a silent battle of wills. My mind screamed to look away, to hide, but I couldn't. The face seemed to pulse with malice, its grin widening as if it fed on my fear. Then it moved its head, tilting slowly, deliberately, as if savoring my terror. A scream tore through the night. Not mine, not Sarah's, but something outside, a blood-curdling wail that shattered the silence. The face vanished, the window empty, but the scream echoed in my skull, a sound I'd never forget. I bolted upright, my chest heaving, my eyes scanning the room. Sarah stirred, murmuring, but didn't wake. The scream had come from outside, from the thing at the window. I stumbled to the door, my legs shaking, and ran to my parents' room. "Dad!" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. He was already up, his face pale, a double-barrel shotgun in his hands. "Stay here," he said, his voice low as he moved toward the front door. Mom pulled Sarah and me close, her arms trembling, but firm. I wanted to tell them about the face, the grin, but my throat was dry, the words trapped. Dad stepped outside, the shotgun raised. I heard the crunch of snow, then a shout, followed by 2 deafening blasts. The air seemed to shatter the cabin, trembling with the force of the shots. Mom clutched us tighter, her breath ragged. "It's okay," she whispered. But it wasn't. Nothing was okay. I saw it in her eyes, the same fear I felt, the same certainty that whatever was out there wasn't human, wasn't natural. It's still there. I thought my mind looping back to that grin, those eyes. It's not gone. We ran, but the terror followed a shadow stitched to our souls. Dad burst back into the cabin, his face ashen, the shotgun still smoking in his hands. "Get to the car," he barked, his voice raw with urgency. Mom scooped Sarah up, her rabbit dangling from her hand, and I followed my bare feet stinging against the cold floor. The air outside was a knife cutting through my pajamas, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was that face, that grin, those eyes that seemed to see through me, into me, past me. We piled into the car, the engine roaring to life. As Dad floored the gas, the tires spinning on the icy gravel. I pressed my face against the window, my breath fogging the glass, and looked back at the cabin. In the moonlight, I saw it, a shape tall and lanky, sprawled in the snow where Dad had shot it. But as we sped away, I swear I saw it twitch its head, lifting that grin still carved across its face. My stomach lurched, and I turned away, burying my face in Mom's side. "It's okay," she kept saying, her voice a mantra, but I could feel her trembling, her hands clutching us too tightly. Sarah was crying now, her rabbit soaked with tears, and I wanted to comfort her, but I was too scared, too lost in the memory of those eyes. We drove for hours, the mountains swallowing the cabin behind us. No one spoke. The silence, heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and Sarah's soft sobs. I kept replaying the night in my mind, the bang, the scratching, the face, the scream. What was it? I wondered, my thoughts spiraling. A man, a monster, something else. Dad's hands gripped the wheel so hard, his knuckles were white, and I knew he'd seen it too, though he'd never admit it. Mom stared straight ahead, her lips moving silently, maybe praying. maybe just trying to hold herself together. We never went back to that cabin, never spoke of it. Not really. But the memory clung to me, a weight I couldn't shake. Years later, as a 28-year-old man, I still see that face in my nightmares. Those black eyes that grin staring through me. Therapy helps, but it doesn't erase it. I've tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was a trick of the light, a hallucination born of fear. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. That scream, that unnatural wail, wasn't human. It was something older. Something that didn't belong in our world. Sometimes I wonder if it's still out there, waiting in the snow, watching for someone else to stumble into its domain. I wonder if Dad's shots did anything, or if it's still lurking. Its grin unchanged, its eyes unblinking. I've never gone back to that forest, never driven those roads again. But every winter, when the wind howls and the shadows stretch, I feel it, a prickle on my neck, a whisper in the dark. It's still there, it says, and it remembers you. I close my eyes, count my breaths, and pray it stays in the mountains far from me, far from us all. But deep down, I know the truth. Some things don't die. Some things just wait.